All right, Gator fans. So we're going to talk about a topic that has always been a part of college sports, and meaning that who's a blue blood of a sport, and who isn't the blue blood of a sport. Because in college football and in college basketball, or really just in NCAA, in college athletics in general, you have your blue blood gatekeepers, and they feel like they have a pretty good idea on who should be considered the blue blood of a sport. And in this conversation by Neil Blackman on Saturday Down South, he writes in an article called 10 Things I'm Absolutely Overreacting to in SEC Basketball After 7 Weeks of Play. He just posted this article today, and he was talking about if the Gators, or he was asking if the Gators have a good enough resume to now be considered in the blue blood category. So here is his part of the article right here. I'm only focusing on the Florida part for this video. I'm not focused on the entire thing. Blue blood gatekeepers out and loud after Florida thumps Kentucky. And if you didn't know the team's names and result of Florida's 92-83 victory over Kentucky on Saturday in Gainesville, he's talking about last Saturday because tomorrow is Saturday. I'm recording this on a Friday. It would be natural to identify the reigning champion as the blue blood program in the above sentence. Sure, you'd respect the plucky road underdog, but the team with the poise of a champion who leads wire to wire despite it getting its rival's best shot, that's blue blood stuff. No, of course, Kentucky's the bluest of blue bloods. It's not even like Kentucky's clearly at the top when you're talking about SEC basketball history. When you're talking about basketball history in the SEC, it starts and likely ends with Kentucky of all. But, obviously, over the last century, Florida has elevated their ranks in that department. But Kentucky fans gnashed their teeth and hurled a whirling dervish of insecure insults following Florida's victory Saturday. I dare to write that Florida with 3 national championships is SEC basketball royalty too. This begs the question, what's the deal with blue blood gatekeeping? Why is it so important to fans of schools rich with traditions and history to guard who has access to the blue blood label, and why? Are any parameters of line of demarcation arbitrary unless they are defined by the blue blood gatekeepers? These are all snarky inquiries, of course, but the real question remain what makes a program blue blood? Do you need to be a blue blood to be SEC royalty? Let's examine Florida's blue blood credentials. First, the bad data points. The Gators are only in the top half of the SEC in all-time SEC basketball win percentage. That number improves to top 4 since integration. That's an important bullet point in time of SEC basketball history. But once you include its whole basketball history, meaning including before integration, Florida isn't even one of the top 2 winningest programs in SEC basketball history, and they're not even one of the top 20 basketball winning programs of all time. Florida is also a football school. Yes, basketball matters at Florida. The Gators rank 3rd in the SEC in sellouts this decade, meaning 2022 to this current year, 2026. For example, and Florida has played in 4 of the most watched basketball games this decade on television, which included their victory over Kentucky on Saturday. But football moves the needle at Florida the way it does at every SEC school except for Kentucky, and he also put arguably Arkansas. Can you be a basketball blue blood and a football school? I've heard some, like CBS's Gary Parrish, suggest no. And I think that's a reasonable argument given the list of traditional blue bloods in basketball. Kentucky, North Carolina, Duke, Kansas, UCLA, Michigan State, and Connecticut. And also Connecticut is not just a blue blood in men's basketball, they're a blue blood in women's basketball too. They're the only, I think you could say they may be the only school in America that has 5 national championships for women's and men's basketball. I'm going to make sure I Google that afterwards. So I'm going to remind myself of that. And that does not include a single football school. Right? All those programs are purely basketball. Where does that leave Florida? I think royalty seems a fair label. Here are the good data points. Florida leads the SEC in Final Four appearances. They lead the lead in Elite 8 appearances, NCAA tournament wins, NCAA tournament win percentage, and national championships 3-1 won by all other SEC programs combined this century. That other one was Kentucky in 2012. No other program outside of Florida and Kentucky have won a championship this century, and Florida has tripled Kentucky in that category. Then some other SEC schools have, been more competitive in basketball. Auburn has made a couple of Final Four appearances under Bruce Pearl. Alabama did it with Nate Oates, and Tennessee under Rick Barnes has gotten to the Elite Eight. Still haven't made a Final Four, but they've gotten to an Elite Eight at least. And Arkansas is trending upward now that John Calipari is in Fayetteville. And Arkansas has resources up the yin yang, so they are capable of being an SEC juggernaut. And to me, that has not been taken to its full advantage, to its full extent for quite a while. Florida is also a top 10 nationally in wins this century and win percentage. Florida's advanced to the Final Four under 3 different coaches. If you're going back to 1990s, he's talking about Lon Kruger and, of course, Billy Donovan and Todd Golden. Suggesting ability to win at Florida is not contingent on one's coach legacy. And 4 different Florida staffs that advanced to the Elite Eight. That's including those 3 coaches I named, and even Mike White is in that category as well. Florida, in other words, profiles similarly to a program like Villanova or Michigan, where winning championships constantly is possible, though the level of periods of sustained winning tend to ebb and flow with time. That's not a bad place to be, and Florida's now 3+ decade run of success certainly warrants the royalty label. Florida won't ever be Kentucky. Yeah, Kentucky has 8, Florida has 3, Arkansas has 1, and the rest of the conference has none. And Kentucky, I think before integration, already had 4 national championships under Adolph Rupp, and I think he won another one afterwards, after integration. And Tubby Smith, Rick Pitino, and John Calipari would add to that collection as well. I talked about that in my Florida-Kentucky rivalry video. But judging the sheer volume of Kentucky fans and in their feelings about Florida's rivalry win and current program status, the Gators are good enough in their own right, regardless of what the gatekeepers think. And I don't think it's an overestimation. And that was the end of that part of the article. And now I'm just gonna give you my take on it. I don't think it's out of question you can say that Florida has now become one of the top brands in college basketball with, winning back-to-back under Billy Donovan and, being more in the conversation throughout the century. Yeah, they don't have consistently, like you would say, Duke or the other schools that he mentioned, but Florida has 3, and I think that's just underneath Kansas. And Florida has as many national championships as Michigan State. Florida has tripled the national championships as Ohio State, and they've been to 11 Final Fours. So Florida is a juggernaut. They are a big name in college basketball. They've proven to be. And I think it's really ridiculous that Kentucky fans are so spoiled and entitled to the name Blue Blood that they hate the idea that another team is now. I don't think Florida's ever going to catch Kentucky, but to get mad that Florida has closing that gap. Sorry, a bug just flew on me. That's why you heard that. Has closing the gap. I think it's silly and childish of Kentucky fans. You can have the success that you have and still have the argument and still acknowledge the fact that the Florida brand is now way bigger than it was beforehand, and that Florida is now much higher in the SEC ranks. Not higher than you, but certainly the gap between you and them has certainly closed over the last 25, 26 years. It's like if I ever say professional basketball, the Golden State Warriors are not at the level brand-wise as you would say the Celtics and the Lakers. But that success they had winning 3 and 4 years with Steph Curry, Draymond, and Klay Thompson under Steve Kerr, and then winning a 4th one a few years ago, that brand is certainly a lot bigger now in 2026 than you would say maybe in 2006 when the Lakers obviously had Kobe Bryant and the Celtics were a few years away from putting together the big 3 that would go on to win a championship together. It's okay to say that the Warriors are not the Lakers and Celtics, but they're certainly a lot higher in terms of basketball royalty than what they were once upon a time. You can acknowledge that. And I think Kentucky fans should be able to acknowledge that as well. Florida, you're the kings of SEC basketball throughout the entire history of the conference, no doubt. But you are not the only juggernaut in the conference anymore. Florida is. Florida is a juggernaut in basketball. And Florida, that what makes that championship run that they had last year so special, not only because of how fun it was and how great that team was and how magnificent that Final Four was, Florida became the only school in America with 3 national titles in both football and basketball. 11 schools have championships in both of those sports. Florida's the only one with 3 apiece. One is either heavily favored in basketball, like you would say Indiana or Michigan State, and the other ones are heavily favored in football, like you would say Michigan or Ohio State. So it's okay to acknowledge that Florida is a SEC juggernaut in basketball, whether Kentucky fans want to disagree with that or not. And if Florida messes around and actually repeats, then it's not even debate anymore that Florida is the top program in the SEC currently. I think they currently are the top program right now, coming off a national championship, and they're in the front row seat of another SEC championship. So that's really my take on it. Thank you guys for listening, and I'll have another video for you tomorrow when the Gators go on the road to take on Ole Miss in Oxford.